We're going to talk about the controls. There's an air control here. There's your fan pattern, and there's your trigger control down here. So I'm actually going to use this air regulator as well. Typically, I don't like an air regulator at the butt of the gun, and it's partly because my hands are small. But it's also because of the mechanics of it. See what is happening there? It's hitting my forearm. I don't like it. I want this, and then it skews my hand position, and I become uncomfortable. And by the time I get 5 coats around a conversion van, I'm tired. So I like to set my wall regulator. Actually, I've got a regulator like this that I can set my pressure, read it on the gun, set my wall regulator based on the pressure here, and then I can safely remove this, get it out of the way, get that restrictive valve out of the way, and be confident that I've got the inlet pressure that I've preset. We're going to stick with it here because the wall regulator is about 180 feet away. So we're not going to go there. So I had a little mixing cup. Here we go. It looks like, it does actually look like coffee. It's Dunkin' Donuts. It's about the consistency of today's clear coat. Like I said, it's like pancake syrup.
You're calling that craft paint?
It's water-based paint. We got it at Walmart, and it's just, it's water paint. Concourse, about 20 psi at the inlet. So we're going to set it at that. You've got several controls on this gun, which are universal. You've got, well, this isn't always on every gun. I like this feature because I can choke the pressure back. If you got a little tight recess that I want to squirt a little bit extra in. If I've missed, I've got some dry spray on a wheel arch, I like to bring the air pressure down and kind of mist it back in without blasting the whole rest of the panel. So this is a nice feature to have, but it's not 100% necessary. So you've got a fan control up on the top, which I'm going to dial all the way in, and your fluid control, which as you can see, it doesn't allow any paint out. So your fluid control, and there's theories all over the place on the fluid control. I like to open the gun up and let it do what it's going to do. This is a carburetor. A carburetor mixes air and fuel and atomizes it. This is a carburetor. It just doesn't have gasoline in it. It's got your paint in it. So to me, somebody has spent a lot of time, there's an engineer that's developed and designed this gun to atomize paint properly. Okay, see what happens? We've got a lot of paint coming out, and my fan pattern is in a dot. And there's a purpose for that, but it's not really painting cars. So now I've got my fluid delivery wide open. So I'm going to back my fan control off to where I have the football shape. It's an elliptical pattern, and that's precisely what you want. If it's heavy on one side or the other side, for instance, if you've got a pattern that looks kind of like an 8, chances are your air pressure is too high and it's blowing it out. The air horns are shooting air in to the point to where it's weak in the middle and heavy on the sides. Typical troubleshooting as well. If you've got a pattern that kind of looks like a banana, one of your air horns is probably plugged up. Typically it's the opposite side to what the pattern is looking like. And again, if you've got a pattern that's really heavy on one side and light on another side, chances are you've got some kind of gummed up, your needle seat is probably got something built up on it. So that's a great excuse to break the gun down, clean it up, and start over again. And we'll talk about gun cleaning too. And that brings up another point. Has anybody ever bought a spray gun, took it out of the box, put some paint in it, and shot a panel and not had problems? Has anybody ever done that? I've done it. I got excited. I had a job to shoot, and pulled the paint gun out of the box, and I got by with it, I got away with it. But sometimes there are coatings that are put on this spray equipment that is designed to keep it from corroding. So when you get excuse me, when you get a paint gun in a box like this, chances are it's sat in a warehouse, it's sat on a manufacturing line, they put coatings on it, anything from cosmoline to kerosene stuff, it's aluminum on the inside. It's machined on the outside and anodized, but it's not on the inside. The internal fluid passages are raw aluminum. So they want to coat that, so in case it sits on a warehouse or a loading dock somewhere for a year and a half, it's not going to corrode on the inside and cause you guys problems. That makes it very, very important to clean that gun thoroughly. Break it apart, pull the needle and seat out of it, break it apart, pull the cap off, clean it thoroughly, and then put it back together, shoot some solvent through it, and then you can start effectively on your paint job. It's very important. It's a pretty heavy-duty troubleshooting thing, and talking to the guys at the tech center here, they have that conversation a lot with people that have bought a spray gun, and they've pulled it out of the box thinking, well, it's new, it should be perfectly clean. It's not, and it's not the fault of the spray gun, it's not the fault of Eastwood, it's not the fault of Sada, of an Eastwood, it's not the fault of anybody, DeVilbiss. Nobody counts on you guys not cleaning your equipment first. It's not in the instruction sheet, but it's a really good idea to keep back here. So that's one way that you can eliminate a problem. So, Greg?
Yes.
Greg was talking about overlap. Typically you want a 50% overlap. Now there's reasons that you want to break that rule, but a 50% overlap is pretty much industry standard. Now what that means, obviously, is that you're overlapping, and I'm moving up halfway through that pattern. And again, that builds this coating evenly all the way through that paint job. So your 50% overlap is pretty darn important. So we've got spray technique. How many guys have painted an entire car? There's a method that I call leapfrogging. It's on the Paint Education instructional DVDs, on the Paint Your Own Car video. Basically, it's where to start and where to stop on an entire paint job. So I will actually eventually get to a point here, but on the Paint Education DVD, I start at the roof. I do what's called a push-pull method. I push into the middle of the panel, walk around the side of the car, drag it off the middle of the panel down onto the sail panel, work my way across the deck lid, quarter, door, fender, hood, front. I'm done. That's my coat. So the push-pull method, now I've worked around painters that have fantastic results doing the opposite of what I'm going to tell you to do. And I'm not here to say that Tim Strange or Charlie Hutton or those guys can't paint, because they do what I'm talking about. And what I mean is they'll start in the middle of a hood, and they'll work their way down, and then they'll come over here to the other side of the hood, and then they'll work their way down here again. That's not what I like to do, and it's not what works best for me, and it's not what I like to coach people on. What I like to do is start on an edge. Typically, I'll even start here. I'll come down here, and I'll work my way to the middle of that panel. If I can go all the way across and keep it continuous, I will. But what I'm doing here, I'm in danger of my air hose hitting that panel. If I've got a spray suit on that I haven't taped around my waist, there's a danger of that hitting the panel, because I've just painted that. That's brand new wet coating seconds ago. So what I want to do is work my way until I'm right at the end of my comfort zone. Then I'm going to come around, pick up that wet edge, and drag it. It's like rolling out a piece of fabric on top of a surface. So you're basically rolling out that roll of paint. Now what happens, and this is what happens, and doesn't mean that those guys aren't getting good results doing that, but what happens when you start in the middle is that you have a coat of paint here. And I'm working my way down here. In the minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the size of the panel that you've spent here, what's happened to this edge? It's gotten dry, exactly. So now what you have to do, yes, you can overlap it, but if you use the same overlap in the same time and the same rhythm that you pick up on doing this panel, well, you've got a big dry spray there. If you hammer that paint to where it's going to melt in, you've overcoated. So now you've got 3 coats in the space of 1 coat in order to wet it enough to carry on the procedure that you could have made easier by working your way and starting from one side and working your way to the other side. It's called picking up the wet edge. And it's just a simple mechanical thing. I go to my comfort zone, I come back around. It takes me seconds to walk around the car. I don't have to run because I've got enough time. And I pick up that wet edge and I work my way across the panel. And like I said, it's like rolling that piece of felt across that hood. And it's a very continuous motion and it's smooth. Our goal here is to seem like we've dipped that car into the paint. And by using the leapfrog method, starting one side of the roof over to the other side of the roof, down the sail panel, down the other sail panel, over the deck lid, across the back. Now I leapfrog to the door and I blend my panel. I leapfrog to the other door and I come to the fender. I work my way across the hood, then to the other fender, now to the front of the car. That's the pattern I use. It's like a mantra for me. And it creates this envelope of paint that swallows the car. And it's one continuous coat instead of fighting that paint, fighting those dry edges. Now, I'm just going to keep talking if you guys don't ask questions because there's... Yes, sir.
Talking about fighting.
Yes, sir.
What about when you're using white and you're fighting the edge?
Okay.
No overlap.
And you're trying to see it?
You're trying to see it.
Okay. The question was, what if you're using a light color like white and you're trying to use overlap and you're trying to fight that, because you have to pick up the wet edge. If you can't see the wet edge, you can't find it, you can't drag it across the panel. It's a very serious problem, and it's something that you have to overcome, and here's how I overcome it. Basically, when you look at something like this, when I'm standing like this, I can see the paint go down, but if I've got a light gray sealer and white paint, or I'm on my third coat of white paint, yes, it becomes a problem. So what do? There's always light. There's a light source somewhere, whether it's the sun, whether it's fluorescent lights in a professional booth, or whether you've got a homemade lighting setup, hopefully that's safe, you can find that light. The way I find that light is to stand off the side. Now, I need a volunteer. Somebody, come on. What's your name, sir?
Pat.
Pat, I'm Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
I'm sorry, I'm Chip. Hi. Okay, when you're looking, stand right where I'm standing, right there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look at that tape, you can't see the reflection, can you?
No.
Come down a little bit and come over to the side. Now you can see all kinds of reflection, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So what you've done is you found your light. Thanks. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay. The simple action of changing where you are and letting the light hit your eyes, that's how you find that wet edge. Is it uncomfortable? Yeah. It doesn't cost you the paint job. You don't have dry spray when you go to buff the car. So find your light source. And it's the same way when you're using when you're clear coating, it's especially important because your base coats, they dull down. And I'm assuming everybody here is using base coat clear coat systems, right? Your base coats, they dull down. That's what you want. That's what tells you you're ready for the next coat, and that's what tells you you're ready for your clear coats, especially with waterborne. And we can talk about that if you want to, or we don't have to because we're hobby guys and we don't have to right now. So thank goodness for that. But anyway, you find your light source by manipulating where you are and looking to find it and looking to see it. And that's the best method for me to paint clear coats as well. Just like when you're hammering a nail, you got to be there. You got to have the, but with the spray painting, I can get down here and I can get on about a 45-degree angle and I can see precisely where that's reflecting. I can find the smallest amount of light and I can sight and I can see where my overlap is hitting. So it's about changing your body position to find the light. That's pretty much the answer that I wanted to give.
I just find it very hard.
It is hard. It's tough.
In a booth where you have all the fluorescent lights,
Yeah.
because it's just lights are just so overpowering.
Yeah, yeah. And that brings up another thing. And it's really important to wear eye protection. Really important. Even if you're wearing a mask or a respirator or forced air, whatever, eye protection allows you to do one thing that's really relevant to that problem. It allows you to get really close. Because the bounce back from that spray gun can get into your eyes. So you don't want that. Isocyanate urethane catalyst is moisture cured. It cures with the moisture in the air. So when you spray it with your mucous membranes open, with your lungs, your mouth, your eyes, mucous membranes, what do we have in our eyes? There's tears, there's moisture. So when that stuff hits your eyes, it kicks. Not good. If you have a way to protect your eyes from that, even if you're wearing just a respirator mask, a pair of safety glasses even to keep that bounce back from going into your, throw them away at the end of the paint job. Have some goggles that are vented on the top. Protect your eyes. It not only keeps your eyes safe, but it allows you to not squint and fight that panel, but you can get up close, just like you're welding. You can get up close to that sucker and you can see the weld pool. Now you can get up close and you're not afraid of the paint coming into your eyes. You're protected, you're smart for doing that, but you can also get right up close to that thing and in a difficult situation find your light. So there's another safety plug for a reason that's almost as good as safety. Now you had a question.
When I spray down base coat, it seems like I have to go awful slow to get it to come out right.
Right.
You see these guys on TV, they're freaking whipping through. Is that film speeded up?
It's not film speeded up. The question is, he's got a slow delivery rate on his base coats. And all these idiots on TV, that make cars on TV, we're rocking and rolling, we're going fast. It's not sped up film. It's a question of technique. Here, okay, when I'm spraying up here, watch what happens. Look at my gun distance. This is exaggerated, of course. Look at what happens. See that pattern? It's splotchy, it's misty, and I went really slow. Watch what happens now. Now I'm in my sweet spot. See what that did? I've got a fat, even coat there, and I rocked through that sucker. So a very, very smart man, his name is Hub Forrester, and he taught me about painting fast. And he said, you're going to have to learn, you're going to have to keep your distance separate, but try it my way. And he gets down, this guy's 84 years old, he's still teaching paint classes. He's a hero of mine, he's a fantastic instructor. But he's painting like this, and he is rocking through the panel, and he has perfect paint. He paints Steinway pianos for high-end clients. He is a master, and he taught me that technique, and it serves me very well. So that's probably, I'm guessing, what you're seeing in some of these shows. Yeah, open your fan up a little wider, get your gun distance lower. You're going to have to really refine your skills and, you know, tape your paintbrush, whatever. You know, nobody's looking, nobody's going to make fun of you for a paintbrush stuck to your pneumatic spray gun. But that can perfect that technique for you. And with these HVLP guns, there's a rate of atomization. As you get farther away, your particles are farther apart. Just like when I raise the gun distance, the particles here are very far apart. Up close, they're very close together, and they're a lot smaller. So your fan pattern, it's a finer mist, it's a finer atomization as you find that tight sweet spot. Here's something that I want to... Yes?
Could that be an air delivery problem?
It could be an air delivery problem. Great statement, great observation. It could be an air delivery problem. What's your air compressor setup?
It's a big, it's 2-stage, 60-gallon tank.
So you're okay. So yeah, it's probably not that. But if you're working with a 3-horse, 30-gallon, yeah, you could be having base coat problems and a slow application time based on air delivery. Another thing is the fluid tip size. This ships with a 1.2. My opinion, I want to spray base coats, especially metallics, with a 1.4. 1.6 is a little too fat, but I like a 1.4. It's what I've gotten used to. I'm not saying you can't with a 1.2, but a 1.4 works best for me, and it works best for a lot of guys that I coach on a hobby level. Now, you're clear.
Paint manufacturers usually right on with their paint tips?
Typically they are, because each paint manufacturer is a little bit different with what their compositions and their reducers. And so yeah, follow the guide, follow the P-sheets on the paint. Eastwood's got great guides on their paint systems, and just follow what they recommend. Whether it's BASF, PPG, doesn't matter. They've got great P-sheets, they've got engineers that have figured out all these systems. I want you to hear something. How are we doing for time, Randy?
Almost an hour. Okay.
So, this is called the Wall of Air test. A friend of mine, his name is Gary Laska. He's on the Paint Education Forum. He's a brilliant guy. He's a home hobby guy. He is actually a railroad engineer for a living, but he helps me. He helps guys. He's a master welder. He's whatever. He's a good buddy, and he helps me out a lot on the forums. And he taught me this test. It's called the Wall of Air test. Listen real carefully. You hear the sound? Okay, it's a rudimentary test. It's a very fundamentally simple test. When you hear that sound, look at the distance between my gun and that fluid tip. It's about 4 inches. A big 7, your wall of air would be about here. That's a really good idea to find the sweet spot of that finest atomization in your spray gun, whatever the gun is. Typically with an HVLP gun like this Concourse, it's about 4 inches from the surface. So, if you're spraying base coat up here, and you haven't done your wall of air test, you know, I've got the fluid delivery choked off, so I can paint without painting my hand. 4 inches, well, that's about that distance. That's not that high. That's not that high off of that panel. Now, you can tighten it in and you get a finer atomization. Your pattern goes down, but your atomization is up. It's smaller, it's finer. So it's really tight to the surface these days, guys. It's really close to the painting surfaces. So all these factors, your air delivery, your technique mostly, and the way you're holding your gun to the panel, the way you've reduced the paint, if you're following the P-sheets and the recommendations, it's this giant, wonderful recipe of this beautiful soup that we make and we paint a car with. So all of these things matter. Have we got any other questions?
Same with primer?
Primer. Is that the same with primer? Yes, it is. Primer surfacer, Primer is a misnomer. The primer means many different things. There's primer surfacer, there's primer sealer, there's all kinds of primers. There's metal coatings, there's high build primers, there's blocking primers, all that kind of stuff. But primer surfacer is what we're going to be talking about, which is a high build primer that's meant to surface an area, to level it down and make something smoother and set it up for the top coats. So your primers range from anything to where I wouldn't recommend anything smaller than a 1.6 fluid tip on primers. That's the minimum. Now, some of these higher build primers have a higher viscosity. The urethane primers are a little bit thinner. What I've really come to love are the polyester primer surfacers. I used to use a brand called Clausen. It's a high build poly primer, and we use them on the TV shows, and this stuff is great. It's very high build. It was first developed to do hail damage and to fill in the hail dents to where you could block it flat without having to pop the dents out. And poly's been around for a long time. Does anybody remember feather fill? Yeah. Feather fill is where I learned how to block cars, and I had this guy that was mean as heck. I was working at a shop called Alejandra Porsche in Southern California, just off Venice Beach, and Juan Alejandra said, okay, he called me Killer because he couldn't remember my name, but he said, okay, Killer, we're going to block this car. We'd shoot it with feather fill, which got as hard as this concrete parking lot, if you remember blocking feather fill, and this guy does. And you know, he would let it sit for 3 or 4 days out in the California sun, and he'd say, okay, KT, guide coat it and block it. And you know, the way to hit feather fill is about 40 minutes after you shoot it, because it's still soft enough. It's seriously, but anyway, but it taught me not only not to listen to Juan, but it taught me how to block panels, you know. And you know, but feather fill used to be the high build poly, and it's beautiful stuff. It's great stuff. It was really brittle too, so if you had any kind of flex in the part, sometimes when you stacked it really high, it would crack. The polyesters today are much more sophisticated, and like I said, on Jaded we used all the Eastwood products, including their brand new poly filler. It's a polyester high build filler, and it's beautiful stuff. It powders like butter. It's amazing. It powders like lacquer primer months after I sprayed it. We probably did 5 sessions of priming and blocking on that car to get it straight, and the car's nice and straight. I'm very proud of the body work on it, and I'm not the only one that did body work on it, but we use the polyfill almost exclusively. The other thing about the old school polys, the old feather fills, is that it was like concrete. It was so porous that you had to put a 2K or a lacquer on top of it for your paint to sit on. These new polys, like the Eastwood poly, you don't have to. So I like the Clausen stuff. I love the Eastwood stuff because it powders nice, it blocks nice, I can top coat it, and I'm trying real hard. We're meeting with the R&D guys to talk them into offering different colors. So now you can bypass a sealer step. If you've got a dark color, the Eastwood poly is a really bright color. It's almost white. It's beautiful primer, but so far they only come in that color. Is JR kicking around anywhere? So we're going to talk to those guys, see if they can make different colors, like a dark and maybe even a red tint, something like that. But for primers, for the polys, I will get to your point in the question. 2.0 or larger, that's a garden hose. That's a giant fluid tip. You have to have it because that stuff is so thick and there's almost no solvents in it, which is part of the beauty of it. It's about 80% solids, which means only 20% of that liquid evaporates off. So what you spray on that car stays on that car. So it gives you a lot of meat to block. So your polys need a big fat fluid tip. Now the Evolution gun comes with a 2.0. And I did all the polys with the Evolution gun on Jaded. So the tools and equipment are here. There's other guns with larger fluid tips. Yeah, you can accommodate that. But if you try and shoot poly through a 1.6, it's not going to happen. It's going to be really dry, and unless you cut it with acetone, then you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And even when you add acetone to it, you're adding a solvent to a product that's not designed to have solvent. So invest in a 2.0 fluid tip. They sell the fluid tips separately here as well. So that's a really nice add-on to have. You can have a multi-purpose gun, several different tips. You don't have to buy 5 guns. You can have 5 tips in 1 gun. So for primer surfacers, did that kind of answer your question?
We did.
Okay, cool deal.
Now what about for urethane sealers?
Urethane.
Still a 2 or a 1/8?
I would go with a 1.6 or 1.8 because you're going to get, you know, you can add another half part of reducer if you want it really lay flat and not really violate any film build issues or anything like that. And if you're doing a sealer for the purpose of a sealer, then yeah, you can use a 1.6 or I wouldn't use a 1.8. 1.6 I think would be good. It brings up something. How many guys use a sealer before they put their top coats down? Why do you use a sealer?
Well, I do if there was some body work done and
Yeah.
I want everything all
one color. Tomorrow I'm going to
Yeah.
paint a white Zubru that has like a aftermarket kit.
Yeah.
They're black parts.
Yeah.
So if I put a white sealer on, then I know I'm working with an even.
Yeah. What's your name?
Doug.
Doug's reason for using a sealer is the reason that I use a sealer. It's to get a continuous ground coat color in which to put my top coats on top of. Now, I've seen guys not use a sealer and have a leopard spotted paint job and have to use twice as many base coats, especially reds or light blues. You have to use twice as much base coat, and sometimes you still get those spots ghosting through. I've also seen guys with a primer job that's perfect. It's high build primer, 2K, poly, whatever. It's high build primer, and it's all one color. And they've spot primed and they've got nothing covered up, and it's gray. And they're painting white, and they go ahead and put a gray sealer coat on that because that's what they remember they should do. Now, what they've done is they've added another layer of solvents that has to evacuate and evaporate out of that paint job. And now they're going to put their 5 coats of top coat on it and 3 coats of clear or 6 coats of clear, however much clear they're going to do, and they're stacking solvents. So my point is, anytime you can do what he does and eliminate the need for a layer of solvent, please do it, because it's going to serve you in the end. Solvents are the necessary evil of paint. It has nothing to do with paint. It is called a transfer vehicle. It's like getting on the bus to go to work. Solvent, and then the bus goes away, you're still at work. That's precisely the function of solvent in paint. We got to have it because we have to turn it from a liquid to a solid. The solids are what's left over. I've been talking about high solids, low solids, lacquer, 17% solids, high build poly, 80% solids. The solvent, which is the 20% of that, gets out of Dodge. You're left with what's hard, what cures. So anytime you can eliminate a layer of solvent that has to evacuate, it is not a part of the equation of paint. Solvent is bad. Solvent is not our friend. It has to happen. We have to dance with it. We have to learn to love it. We have to fight it at times. Solvent pop, trapping issues. I know you guys have had these things on your clear coats, with the little pimples and stuff. It just makes you mad because that solvent is not cooperating. It's the necessary evil of painting. So you have to learn the rules. You have to learn to work with it. So anytime, like I said, I keep hammering this point, anytime you can eliminate a layer of solvent in your paint job, you are better off. So a sealer coat is, yes, it's a great idea because it eliminates 3 coats of base coat that you just don't have to put on that car anymore. So now you've eliminated 3 layers of solvent that has to evacuate. It's got to get out of Dodge. So any way you can facilitate that, you're better off.
Especially when you use a tinnable sealer.
Yeah.
Like if you paint like a blue truck, like
Yeah.
I just did, I had the sealer blue.
Yeah.
So that first coat of base, it's covered.
You've almost got 100% hiding on your first coat. So yeah, that's one of those things where you got to kind of know the rules to like I said, dance with the devil, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're navigating a minefield of crap that can happen and go wrong. And hopefully, if at the end of the day we followed most of those rules, we can come out with a nice paint job. And that's the goal is to get nice work.
Well, what about if you've got panels that you've either chemically stripped or sandblasted, and it's going to be a wall before you actually want to paint the car?
Right.
What are you recommending to coat the car with? A urethane sealer or?
What I like to use an epoxy sealer.
Yeah.
And for instance, the Mustang, I keep going back to that because it's just the last paint job that I did, or the last full restoration that I did. We had it media blasted, and when I got it back, actually at the media blaster, we went ahead and coated it with epoxy as soon as it came out of that blast bay. So we coated it, it was on a rotisserie, it was on a buck. We coated it with one really fat coat of the Eastwood epoxy. It's a 1-to-1 mix. It's very easy to use, and we use black because my top coat colors are going to be dark. It doesn't matter what color. But epoxy gives a nice band-aid. It'll stop it from flash rusting, and it actually, there's a window of about 7 or 8 days to where you can apply your fillers to that epoxy without having to sand it. So it gives you a nice work window for doing your filler work or, like you said, protecting your car. Weekend warrior guys, we can't do the body work on an entire car over the course of a weekend. You're going to do a panel at a time. And this question comes up an awful lot. I'm going to media blast my car because I want to see where the metal is. What do I do to keep it from rusting? Coat it with epoxy, attack it one panel at a time. Even if you have to strip that panel off to get down to doing rust repair, strip the epoxy off, leave it sit on the rest of the car, stop it from rusting. So great question, and that's honestly what I do with just about every single thing I do. Rarely do I work on top of bare steel. Is there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I read where if you get car media blasted,
Yeah.
some of the paint manufacturers aren't going to guarantee their paint because they're saying that the media is not going to let it stick to the
His question was, he read somewhere that some of the paint manufacturers aren't going to honor the warranty of the paint if you media blast the car. Now, that may be the case when you're talking about soda blasting, which is different than almost any other abrasive media. It's very mild and it doesn't profile the metal, which means it doesn't poke holes, it doesn't ruin that mill scale on that metal, and it leaves a much nicer, smoother surface. So I like soda blasting. However, it's very, very important that you use some sort of a cleaner that dissipates that sodium layer that's on there. Now, there's guys that'll say, well, soda blasting is nothing more than salt. Salt is sodium. So you're going to introduce rust. Well, no, there's a thin film that sits on that panel that actually inhibits rust once you get it soda blasted, but you have to get that coating off of there. And Eastwood's got some great chemicals to wash that. There's an afterblast chemical. There's some other etching property chemicals that will take and clean. Thank you. I like this guy. He's covering all of our butts. We'll be on the news if that takes off. But yeah, you got to make sure if you're using soda to go ahead and clean that off and get your substrate ready for something. So yeah, it's not a bad thing, but you just got to do that extra step to prep for it. So. Well, listen, guys, I want to say thank you very much for sticking around as long as you did, and I hope I've answered some of the questions. If anybody's got anything else to say, please, give me a shout. We're doing 2 more of these today. We're doing one at 12:30 and then one at 3 o'clock, and it always changes. It's always different. We're going to be talking about fundamentals, but if you're around, we'll get on another line of questions and subjects. And thank you very much, and thank you to the Eastwood Company. Let's give those guys a huge hand for putting this stuff on.